I'm delighted to be joined by Bill Browder, a big investor, but also a great anti-corruption campaigner who fell out with Putin some years ago. We've talked a little bit today about the sanctions that have been imposed on those who've been supporting Putin. One of the things I've been struck by is that there's been no action taken against a very substantial infrastructure of bankers, of lawyers, of advisors to these Russian oligarchs, who, many of them are British or American. They continue to work. Should governments take action against those who have, in a sense, facilitated these people who, you know, are now referred to as kleptocrats?
Indeed. You've hit the nail on the head. You know, for 20 years, these Russian gangsters, Russian oligarchs, Russian kleptocrats came here with open arms. And there was a whole industry here in London, a whole industry of bankers, lawyers, accountants, trustees, PR firms, catering to them, whitewashing them, money laundering for them. And it's time that there's consequences for these people.
I mean, they've kept all their money, haven't they?
They have. And in fact, some of them are refusing to shut their Russian businesses down now. You've had McDonald's pulling out, you've had MasterCard pulling out, but there's like Freshfields law firm hasn't pulled out. They're insisting on staying.
So look, there's tons more I want to talk to you about, and lots more to pick up with Johnny and Diana. You know, this is a global crisis that's affecting all of us, so please don't go away. So much more to discuss. Welcome back. I'm delighted that the anti-corruption campaigner, former huge investor in Moscow, Bill Browder, is still with us. I mean, I should just point out, Bill, that actually literally within the last couple of hours, I think Freshfields announced they were pulling out of Moscow. We were talking about the sort of infrastructure of UK and US firms that support, you know, the people who you referred to as sort of Russian gangsters. Some of them, obviously, not all of them gangsters, shall we say. But on this issue of the support that the plutocrats give to Putin, why are these individuals important to him as Russian leader?
Well, a lot of people are hoping that if we tackle the oligarchs, if we take them out of the picture economically, they'll then rise up and go after Putin.
But do you think there's any chance of that?
I don't think so. They are there at the pleasure of Vladimir Putin. He can take their money away, take their freedom away, and take their life away with a flick of his pinky. And so
for you, this is sort of natural justice rather than...
No. For me, the key is that Vladimir Putin is a very rich man. He has accumulated an enormous amount of money. I estimate greater than $200 billion. He doesn't keep that money in his own name.
Right.
He keeps that money in the name of people he trusts, the oligarchs. And so if you want...
they're the sort of guardians, so if we go for them, you think we attack his wealth, do you?
So if we freeze the assets of the oligarchs, we freeze Putin's money. And that's the key to the whole story.
Now, he is plainly, he was obviously a very dangerous man, but he's also been a shrewd man. Do you think he's miscalculated this time?
Yeah, but he didn't miscalculate with bad information. He's done a whole series of atrocities before. He invaded Georgia, he took Crimea, he shot down a passenger plane, he poisoned people in Salisbury, and I could go on for half an hour. And there's been no significant consequences. And so he's saying, look, the West can never get their act together. We just constantly look the other way. And so he thought that was what's going to happen here.
And so broadly, he just thought this, you know, we wouldn't respond in the way that we have. Was that his misjudgment?
He thought we were too small-minded, too cynical, and too divided to do what we've just done. And so that was his big bet. And he was wrong.
And if you look at what we've done so far, which is the restrictions put on banks in Russia in their ability to both source money and make transactions, if you look at the way that we've frozen the central bank's assets, if you look at the declining, what we've pledged in terms of reducing what we buy in terms of oil and gas, I mean, this is pretty serious, isn't it?
I would say that this is probably the most serious economic blockade of a country that's ever happened, at least in my lifetime. It's just devastating for Russia. Having said that, I think there's more we can do. For example, we've only unplugged 70% of their banks from SWIFT. We could do 100%. We've only sanctioned 12 oligarchs. We could sanction 100. But we're moving in the right direction, and it's making their heads spin in Moscow right now, I'll tell you that.
And can I just ask, because at the moment, if you look around the West, I mean, you can see why big sporting bodies are saying, you know, we can't let Russian teams compete, and we're not going to have Grand Prix in Russia. I mean, these are sort of big money events, and also carry a lot of status.
Yep.
But are we right to an opera singer in New York says he gets cancelled by the Met? Is that the right thing as well to be doing? I mean,
well, I don't know the opera singer, but there was a conductor, Gergiev, and I think I can't remember if it was the Munich or the Met, and they said condemn Putin. And he refused to, and I think if someone refuses to condemn Putin, imagine during the Holocaust you had a German conductor who supported Hitler. Would we allow that person to be conducting a orchestra?
I mean, Diana. I mean, certainly, we're now expecting individuals to condemn Putin, but the Welsh Symphony Orchestra, I think it was Welsh Philharmonic, simply cancelled a Tchaikovsky programme the other day. I mean, that's a bit absurd, isn't it?
Well, I think it's important that we stick together and we say very firmly that what's happened with Putin is wrong. I suppose I do feel a little bit uncomfortable if you start to ban, world-renowned symphonies and music, because I mean, for years we've had music from musicians that perhaps come from regimes that we don't approve of. So that makes me a little uncomfortable. But what I do think is that we need that across the board, that recognition that we stand together. We do not accept people who won't condemn Putin. I mean, that seems to me fundamental. If sports people are coming out and condemning him, that's absolutely right, and we should say well done to those people.
But if, for example, you are an opera singer and you've got family back in Russia, you're going to be scared for your family if you stand up. I mean, I think these are quite difficult judgments.
Yeah, they are really difficult judgments, and I think all of them are exactly that, a nuanced judgment. And Bill rightly talks about what more we could do, and most people want to go further. But I think we should also be fair. And in terms of, for example, what the government's done for the Ukrainian military, and I've seen it myself as a complete sort of game changer. If you think about the equipment they've given them, this is like no other war we've seen before. In the old days where you would fly a missile, using remote control into a tank, these NLAWs have got a strike rate of about 95, 96%. And the Ukrainians have done incredibly well at fighting the Russians on the ground. So I think whilst people won't get everything they want in this, whether it's all the sanctions or a no-fly zone, there is a different way of doing this with the Patriot missile systems and so on, that actually we can bring this to a conclusion. And Britain has played and will play a big role in that, I think.
I mean, can I ask you, Bill, I mean, you've thought about the psychology of this man for a long, long time. Plainly, the military operation is not going as well as he would have wanted. Right? Yep. Now, when I talk to security sources, they say that makes him more dangerous, that what he'll do in these circumstances is lash out. Actually, the harm to civilians will get worse. Do you fear that he will lash out in that way?
I'm certain he will. I've spent 10 years in a microcosm type of fight with him, and he always escalates. He has no reverse gear. He's not a man who has any capacity to back down. He lives in a sort of prison yard psychology, which is show absolutely no weakness. Escalate, escalate, escalate. And it doesn't really matter what happens. He escalates even if you don't fight back. But the last thing you want to do is not fight back with a guy like this, because he will just absolutely obliterate his enemies.
And is there any level of defeat that the country can suffer where they'll get rid of him?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, he's scared of being gotten rid of. He now sits at 30-foot tables away from all people because he's afraid of nerve gas or whatever he's afraid of. He understands that nobody supports him. This is Vladimir Putin's personal war.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. That was all pretty depressing. Now, I don't know about you, but I never imagined we'd be back to a war so redolent of the last century. So important for us all to understand the shocks that will reverberate for years. See you next week.